with the world the way it is, it does feel like, well, if you want to do X, Y, and Z, or if you want to have a fulfilling life, then you have to do all of these overwhelming steps, and you're not going to be there for your family. But it's actually exactly opposite, that God sees you, and that in the midst of that, he'll make a way for what he wants for your life, and that we don't ever have to neglect ourselves, or that's not God's heart for us, that we're neglected or that we neglect our family, but he takes care of us all the way through.
Hey, what's up, my lovely mama? For the first time ever, I actually have two moms with me, and we had a really, really fun conversation, and it went a little long, so I'm splitting this conversation into two. So today is going to be part one. But I have the pleasure of having author Sarah Humphrey and artist Emily Little on the show. And they did a collaboration project that resulted in a beautiful book called 40 Days to a Joyful Motherhood. Now, Sarah is the mom of 3 kids. Emily is the mom to 1 kid. And what's really cool and interesting about this conversation is that we all share common themes in both our motherhood journey as well as our faith journey. And it continually speaks to how God can create new desires in us that completely change the trajectory of our path, and then also equip us when we feel really unequipped to take on certain challenges or even desires. So in part one, we are going to start with a biggie, and that is guilt and failures. And we'll talk about how to reframe failures, examples of how both Sarah and Emily have been able to do that. And then we'll also talk about faith journeys and how they continue to live and move by the Lord's hand. What does that look like in the past, and what do they do today to make sure that they're keeping their faith strong? Now, when it comes to faith, many of us, maybe all of us, have had doubts and crisis of faith where we are questioning, God, am I doing the right thing? Is this actually my calling? Or even, hey, God, are you truly who you say you are? So in part two, we're going to go through that. Sarah and Emily will share when they have had those big doubts and what they've done about that to continue leading into their faith. And then we're also going to talk about self-care. So make sure you're following the show so you don't miss part 2 coming out next week. Also, as always, if you are enjoying the show, if you love Moms Grab Coffee, I would love it if you would take a quick second to rate the show, write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm trying to get up to 50 reviews, and I'm a little more than halfway, so I just need a few more of you to submit that. So would love your encouragement and would love your support. Thank you so much, my dear friend. Okay, so let's get into this conversation. It is my pleasure to welcome Sarah and Emily. Well, I am so excited to have you guys on. It's such a treat to have you both on. So thank you so much for making the time. Your book here, 40 Days to a Joyful Motherhood. I read it. It is gorgeous. There's so much good stuff in here. I actually like that it felt very much like a step-by-step guide, like you build upon each day. So it's not like you're jumping from one topic to the next, and every day you're kind of doing like a whiplash thing. So I love that it felt like, okay, these are building blocks here. But let's start with, tell us a little bit about yourself. Sarah, if you could go first.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm a homeschool mom in Nashville, and so I've got 3 kids kind of in that teen age. We've been homeschooling for about 5 years, and previous to that, I wrote 40 Days, I think it was in 2016, and it first released as an adult coloring book and devotional together. And at that stage, my kids were probably around your kids' ages, Hannah, a little bit younger, and I was in the thick of the diapers and, all of that. And then as time went on, that trend just kind of drizzled and disappeared. And so we were able to redo this book with Emily's artwork instead, which I love. And honestly, when I first was writing the book was what I envisioned it to be. And so we partnered, and then I was able to go back and kind of edit and add in some new experiences that I've had in the last, 8 or so years. and just share kind of about my motherhood journey while also giving other moms practical tips on walking out theirs. So I did basically when I started writing, I actually wasn't intending to write a book per se. I was actually just journaling my thoughts during my postpartum season. And it ended up turning into a time for me where I went back into all of my journals from early childhood all the way through adulthood and through that postpartum season, that I noticed just different themes in my life that were reoccurring. Like ever since, I was 5 or 6 or 7 years old. And then, hey, it shows up again when I'm 18. And then, hey, it shows up again when I'm, 23. And then, oh my goodness, I'm 30 and I have a baby. And here it is again. It was like these themes in my journals. And so basically what I did after I kind of got through my own process and saw what God was highlighting to me about different themes in my life was I just started to make some practical applications to those feelings or thoughts, about identity or peace or self-acceptance or forgiveness. And I just turned it into a little practical guide. And so that's kind of what happened with 40 days. It started out just very simply and then turned into something simple that I practically made into like a self-published little book. And then a publisher picked it up from there and has helped me shape and form it into, some really great content. And then Emily's art just adds such beauty to it. So the book can also just sit on your coffee table. You can just browse through it too. So it's really been a fun journey from childhood diaries to this.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Sarah, your kids are 8th grade, 6th grade, 5th grade, 3rd grade?
3rd grade. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. We just hit 13 for my oldest. So we're in the teen. We're officially in the teen years now. Yes.
We'll be praying for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
And Hannah, I missed what your kids' ages were.
Yeah, my kids are 6, almost 5, and 2.5.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm a full-time artist and mom, and I have just one, and she's 13. So I know Sarah and I have that in common, that the teen years are upon us. But so this is like my second career. I was actually an English major, and I taught English to kids that had learning disabilities for 13 years. But I always envisioned myself involved in the book world somehow, whether it was like, writing or when I was little, I wanted to write and illustrate. And so it's fun to kind of see this, like not use my degree to get this gig, but like to be in the book world through my art. So, but I actually left art. I was always creative, but I left the school environment and just took an art class for fun. And I had no idea that this is what was going to happen with it. Just that it could be such a fun full-time job that allows me to be super flexible as a mom. And I live in Nashville as well. And I have, 2 dogs. One is probably going to show up here in a minute. He's 100 pounds. So his head will be like,
oh, wow,
right about here if he enters into the screen. Yeah. But yes, this is what I do full time. And I was so excited that, to get this collaboration because Matt West, the publisher, had been wanting to use my art for a project for a long time and had kept saying that he thought that Sarah and I would work well together. And I think he nailed it. I think he did well. So we've enjoyed it.
Yes. It's an awesome book. And I see your artwork there in the background. So that's awesome.
Yes,
you must have a beautiful art studio.
House,
yeah. So I'd love to go through a few book highlights and then just talk about how you both have applied some of the guidance into your own life, just, living the daily rhythms of motherhood. But Sarah, you talked about how this has been kind of a lifelong project, right? You've pulled from your childhood, you've pulled from different parts of your life. Why was now the right time to publish this, I guess, second edition of the book?
I would say the first, creativity is such a process. There's just this book is an example of that because it started as a journal and then it turned into a self-published piece and then it turned into a coloring book and then it turned into this. I think we learn in steps, and so for this to come out in this form at this time, I feel like in all reality is kind of like not a culmination because I think will still grow long term because motherhood is never going to go out of style. It's not a trend. It's a reality of life. But I feel like right now in this season, when I was writing, practically a lot of my kids were in diapers. It was a grudgery kind of time where I wasn't sleeping, and it was really like a creative outlet for me. But now this time around, my kids are older. If I need to go to the store, they can stay home by themselves. Or if I need to come on a podcast interview, I can, leave to do that. So I feel like I wouldn't say the hardest work, because motherhood is always going to be hard work. I mean, even when they're adults, it's going to be hard work. But the age that they're at right now is really helpful for me, because I can still very much relate to the moms who are in the season of diapers and no sleep and feeling that loss of identity, or, what happened to all my freedom during the day. Now I'm really feeling like they're stuck in a rhythm and a routine of not ever caring for themselves. I'm out of that because I do have space and time for myself. And then this, actually, by sharing, is a self-care outlet for me as a mom, because moms need other moms. And so I don't have to, I'm starting an online book club with the book. And I just told them yesterday, I said, I'm rereading my own book again, and doing the book club with all of you again, because I'm a mom too. And I need other moms who do things differently than me, who do things similar than me. And I want to learn from your experience just as much as you're learning from moms, because, my motherhood experience, because moms need each other. And we are community for one another and help each other grow. So I feel like this is it almost feels like dessert this time around, because I do get to sleep and I do get some freedom. But I'm with my kids all the time. Every day I'm still in it, and I'm still learning, and I'm still growing.
Awesome. That's beautiful. And 1000% with you there. We need each other on a daily basis, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person. That's so, so true. Emily, what was your approach for the illustrations? So I want to share a couple in here that are so beautiful.
Thank you.
You guys can see. Whoop.
Oh, yeah.
That. I love these. What was your approach, and what are you hoping they represent?
Well, it's just very serendipitous that they paired us together, because the theme of my art has always been joy. That's just always been the baseline for everything that I do, like my colors, my textures, the things I choose to paint. And so the joke was always, if you start seeing like, dark, somber, serious tones, like somebody needs to come check on me, because I can't paint neutral to save my life. I've tried, and and I'm like, one more color, just one more color, and one more layer. But I think that it was just such a good pairing and such a compliment to Sarah's words, that finding joy in the midst of all of the craziness, and that taking time to even just look at a beautiful picture can soothe your soul, just like going outside can soothe your soul. And because you are in the thick of it, and so I painted all I actually started painting like when I was like right before I got pregnant. So like for the first time, so the art and my motherhood have been hand in hand the whole time, and couldn't be a better pair, because just even in my studio, having my daughter, I've always had it where the whole family can hang out here, like more like the kitchen than like, a studio that's a workplace. Like this is the heart of the home. And so, so that joy, that the textures, the layers, all of that, I just feel like it pairs very well with Sarah's words. And, that you're going to not only get this like nugget to take with you during the day, but you're hopefully going to get this like image that also just makes you smile. And that's kind of how I approach it. And then the graphic design team did a great job of breaking the images down and kind of creating little vignettes throughout the book, and that really work well. That, the simple prayer, like a little graphic, like where you can just like open it up, say that simple prayer. You're nourished by the words, the prayer, and the image, and then you can go about your day. So
yes, I think that totally shines through, especially the joy and even the hope, because, there are some chapters in there that are a little bit difficult, that talk about grief and loneliness and just some of the traumatic parts of just the motherhood journey. And I think pairing that with the beautiful pictures that do convey the joy and are equally, complex, just like the words and the guidances, is perfect. Let's go into some of the highlights. I'm going to start with a big one here, and that is mom guilt and failures, which I think we all can feel that on a really intimate level. And so you have a few days dedicated to that and bringing us out of those guilty and failure moments that dare to, drag us down and put a real dent in our motherhood journey. So I want to point to one very specific example that you shared, Sarah, and that was a sibling squabble that happened during a reading comprehension lesson. You were trying to teach them something, and the siblings start to fight, which I think many of us can relate to. But you didn't necessarily get to the educational goal. However, there was this beautiful moment of reconciliation between your kids that actually ended up feeling like a victory, even though, if you step back from it and measured it from did we get the goal done? No, that may have felt like a failure, but you reframed it. And so I think there are lots of moments where we have an expectation and then reality doesn't meet it. Right. And so I'd love for you guys to talk about, what are some other examples of how you've reframed failure? And Sarah, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I mean, oddly enough, I never intended to be a writer. I studied medicine and was planning on being a doctor. And after I finished my 4-year degree, during I think it was my junior year, I met my husband at college, and we decided, we got engaged and we were going to get married. And so after I finished my 4-year degree, I was in kind of a position where I was like, okay, well, we're going to get married, but now I'm looking at my life a little bit differently. Like, can I really have a practice if I want to be a mom and I want to stay at home and I want to be, a wife that is not busy all of the time? So for me at that time, growing up, I got good grades and I was involved in everything. And pretty much when I tried something, I was decent at it. And so I think that shaped kind of my life into almost like a performance mentality where if you perform well, then life goes well and God loves you and things are, in a nice little perfect line and everything is happy. And at that point, after I graduated, my husband had an opportunity to go to grad school for free, and we had a free place to live because of that. So I decided at that time that I felt like God said, just hang on a second and let him do this, and you get a job for a little bit and we'll work some things out. Well, little did I know that working things out was going to be totally changing the trajectory of my life into a different, avenue that I didn't realize too. So I think at that point, that was before we had kids, but I was still changing the way that I felt like, well, am I failing if I don't do what I had planned on doing all of these years? Like I was going to plan to do medical school, have a practice. And now all of a sudden that's switching. And then you add kids to the mix. And so now not only do I didn't have a career, then I decided to stay home. Then even more, now you're responsible for another person. And oh my goodness, that person isn't exactly the same as me. They're part of me, but they're their own person. And so now me trying to shape and mold another person well, I'm still realizing, wow, I really like my ducks in a row. And this is taking all of my ducks out of their row. And so even in that example on page 47, I was trying to teach them a lesson for schooling. I think, we were doing some reading and whatever. So I was teaching them from the book, like showing them this is how you go. And it turned into this whole other argument between two siblings. And so the whole day slowed down and we all had to get really honest. And here I realized our lesson for that day was really about forgiving one another, because this issue came up that we had to then dig into and figure out what's the root that's going on here. Like, and had we just kept going on with our lesson, or if I had just kept going on with my plan to be a doctor or whatever, I would have missed this beautiful process of reconciliation and learning how to forgive, and the fruit of the spirit in all reality of being able to slow down and see, oh my goodness, on the other side of performance, there was all of this beauty that I would have missed if I just kept plowing through the lesson. Not that that's bad at all, because there are definitely times where you need to just keep moving with the lesson. And we do that a lot at school too, where I'm like, we're going to take a seat on this. We'll come back to it later, and we're going to keep focusing on what we're doing. But in all reality, at first that was a big change for me, to feel like I didn't fail, but that God was just showing me a different part of himself by asking me to really obey him and learn something new that felt a little bit vulnerable and scary, and especially out of my wheelhouse, in the sense of, when I was, the ironic thing is, when I was a kid, I wasn't in like any special writing groups or writing clubs or anything. Like, I think I even remember at one point not being chosen for one of those groups. And I saw all the other kids that had their work like published or whatever. And I felt kind of bad. Like, I didn't take it super hard, but I was kind of like, well, that kind of stinks. Like, I didn't get to do, but now here I am writing a book. And, I never would have done that, though, had we not kind of switched gears, worked through what I thought might have been a failure, and reframe it into actually something else, a gift that God had for me.
Yeah, and being open to that, I think, is so important as well. I mean, for me, I didn't think I'd have a podcast. I went to school for music business. I wanted to be in the recording industry. Never did that. But there are days where I feel like, wow, I spent all that time, all that money getting this degree, and I'm not using it. And you kind of feel that guilt. But you do have to step back and say, okay, what are we truly here for? What is our true purpose? Beyond, we're not trying to chase what the world says is good, or chase worldly dreams. That's not exactly what we're here to do, right, as Christian moms. So Emily, I'd love to switch gears and get your perspective.
Well, I think, like, for me, like, my like motto in painting has always been, there are no mistakes, there's only layers. I say that all the time, because I can paint over a flower or a background multiple times, and at the end, it just wasn't right. It wasn't right. I can't figure it. Something's not right. But then by the end, that's created this beautiful texture, or it's created this beautiful palette. But it was this process that I had to go through to get to that. And I even go back to even how this whole painting thing started. I had to quit something that I was really good at in order to change gears, because it wasn't what I was doing, which I had felt called to do, wasn't working for me anymore. So just to have this second chance at something, and to see it, like, be able to give all credit to God, because there's no rhyme or reason for me to have a career in art. Like, it is, I mean, I was crafty, but I have no degree in it. It wasn't the path, but, and along the way, just to see how God's used everything to get me to this point. But even how I started was like a wrong turn, and like a literal wrong turn. Like, I'd started painting, and I was selling, like, to friends, and mom, and all this kind of stuff. And a friend's like, I really think your stuff would go in a store. And I have a friend that owns a store. I think you should, I'm going to call her and tell her you're going to stop by. And I'm like, okay, cold call. I don't want to do that. And I made a wrong turn. I went to the wrong store. I went, and you know what I mean? Like, I
like a literal wrong turn.
Literal wrong turn led me to, and then because I got in that store, I walked in, I was like, I don't think this is the right store, but I love this store. And I started talking to the owner, which is not like, I'm kind of an introvert, and like selling. So even like that, getting into that store is what, a rep for a big company saw my work there. And that's how I got my licensing in that degree. I mean, It's like, if I hadn't taken the wrong turn, I wouldn't have been there. And so having that, as the base of all that I'm doing right now is so helpful, because when Sophie was little, she was a perfectionist. Like, we were very concerned about her, because I worked with those kids. The kids I worked with at school were either ones that had true learning disabilities, or there were some emotional things. Like, they were such perfectionists that they, if an A- was not good enough for them, in an honors AP class. And so I was like kind of concerned about her. And so, that whole, like, mistakes just show that you're trying, and mistakes are just layers, and there's going to be something beautiful on the other side. And that, like, and so I love that she gets to see me fail. I've had collections that have tanked and like not done well. I've had business relationships that have gone south, and she's had to see me work through all that. And sometimes, like as a 13-year-old, we look at her and we think, oh, I think we've corrected. She doesn't seem as concerned about, like, now it's like, let's make mistakes every day. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
now, like, I'm like, oh, another demerit at school. This is awesome. Yesterday, literally, I was like, please don't get any demerits this week. Like, please, like, can we just like, and I get being throwing paper airplanes in class. And I'm like, what do I even, I like, on the one hand, I'm like, like the Sophie of first and second grade would have been mortified. And the Sophie of seventh grade is like, woohoo, party, but I do love that, like I feel like we can maybe too well have modeled that mistakes mean you're trying, and mistakes mean, you can always redirect or whatever. But so that I think, I love that she can see that. And I actually try to talk through that with her. And what I've also realized about mistakes and choices that we make that don't go well, whether it's in my being too reactive in parenting or taking something personally that's really not about me. I think that when you have a 13-year-old, you get a lot. And so sometimes you can take it personally and think that it's about you, and it's about 1,000 things that are not you. And you just happen to be the person that's absorbing all that. But, I think it just, like Sarah was saying, like, it just builds in an avenue to teach about forgiveness and reconciliation and choice and all those things, which in turn becomes beautiful. So that mistake that you overreacted, or that she was lashing out and being disrespectful, or whatever it is, if you actually take the time to sit down and talk through it, then it builds like that empathy and that trust and that reconciliation. So I mean, I'm a big believer in mistakes. Like, I mean, if you don't ever make one, and like I said, most of my career has all been because of mistakes. And so, like, I mean, the fact that I'm here just shows that God can do anything, and so I love that she sees that. I feel like it's a huge parenting tool for me, because I can always pull from that well when she's struggling with something in school, a subject, something. I was like, hey, listen, like, this is just something that we can build on, and it's going to be even better, the more we build on it. So.
Yes, that's beautiful. Both of your stories, I think, speak to the way God changed your trajectory and then equipped you along the way, right? With Sarah, you didn't have a writing degree. Emily, you didn't have an art degree, but you guys have made such beautiful, holy pieces just by, being obedient to his calling. So that's awesome. And I like the well. I like the fact that you called it a well. And what immediately came to mind is, you can look at it as a well of failure, or you can look at it as a well of life lessons, or a well of growth that you're constantly, pulling water out of.
Yeah.
So awesome. This was not my next question, but I want to move to it because I think there's so much relevance here. You both talked about answering God's calling, being moved and living by the hand of our shepherd, which, Sarah, those are some words from the book. What are some really practical faith-based things that you do to make sure you're continuing to move and live by his hand?
Well, I mean, I think it's, oddly enough, I know during those early times of childhood when the babies you feel like you don't get sleep, that it can be really hard to get up before them because you're already tired. But I found that one of the best practical things that I could have ever done for myself, and still do now, is that I make sure I am awake. For me, it's at least an hour before everybody else in the household is awake as far as kids go. My husband works out really early, so he's usually up and out the door. But just having that really quiet time every morning where I sip my hot coffee in peace, and I have a Bible study I'm doing, or even a writing project that I'm working on, because sometimes, it's not necessarily doing another Bible study or reading out of the Bible, though sometimes it is. Sometimes it's me actually using that time to purposely write something or do an art project that means something to me, because that's also self-care, and that's being guided by God too. It can be either one of those. Like, when I'm up in the morning and I have that time to be with God, whether it's through the word or through an art piece or through a writing or, it really helps me throughout the whole rest of my day to feel like I'm centered by the time that my kids come and ask me questions or need something. And so I have a lot more grace to give and I have a lot more patience. And I realized that extra hour of no sleep, but being with God was more energizing than if I would have hit the snooze, a bunch of times or waited until a little kid was at the side of my bed to say, I'm hungry, whatever.
Yeah. Is there a mental trick, tip, something to help you get out of bed versus snoozing? Because that's my trouble. I love the snooze button.
I know. You know what? I feel like when I was in college, we had a group of friends and we were in like a Bible study or something. And we decided that we were no longer going to snooze. Like that there was some kind of research out about it that they said that when you hit the snooze button, your day is actually worse because you keep, stopping that sleep cycle over and over and over again when you're trying to, hit the snooze, then you fall back asleep, then you hit it again, then you fall back asleep. So I remember for this like month, the little group of us, we were like, we are not snoozing. We are the second it gets up, the alarm goes, we are getting up. And even though I'm not gonna lie, I still sometimes snooze. I did a couple of times this morning. But typically I don't. Like when that alarm goes off, I'm like, okay, it's up. And the fact that I know, like I prep my coffee in the coffee pot the night before. So literally like I just have to like hit the button and then it all, it's just like gloriously there after I like put my glasses on and get going, it's done. And so just that, like get up, hit the button, go to the bathroom, put your glasses on, and now you get to sit in this beautiful, peaceful quiet for an hour. That really has helped me.
Awesome. What about you, Emily?
So my thing is like, I put on a lot of like podcasts and Christian music and stuff like that when I paint. I listen to audiobooks too, but because like I'm using my hands and stuff like that and I can't really watch anything. So I do that a lot and that helps me. I always like go outside first thing in the morning after I drop Sophie off with my coffee. I'm like, Sarah, like it's like my happy thing. I let the dogs out and they run around the yard and I sit with my coffee and I literally just list everything I'm grateful for. Like it's not even like a true, like, dear God, I am, it's just like, I just look around and I'm just like, I'm so thankful. Like, and it's just like, that's just my thing. And the other thing that I do as our church did, our preacher did this whole like sermon series on the Lord's Prayer and it was just really impactful to me. And so because I was always one that felt like I'm not maybe as deep spiritually as some other people. Like I have depth, but I'm just not like a philosopher or whatever. And so the simplicity of the Lord's Prayer and then going through and he like did it line by line. And I have just found that that's a practice that I can do in the mornings, especially, or even throughout the day. Like, what is my daily bread today? What are the things I need to, you know what I mean? Like it's such a good guidance for me. And then, but like, I do like, I also like listen to the Bible in a year podcast kind of things like where, so I'm not necessarily like reading like as much as I would love to. I'm not, Sarah, I wish I could get up and do that. So I am the worst. I could paint all night long. I could stay up all night long, but the mornings are
hard.
Just, I want to be a morning person so bad. I know. I mean, I do.
Me too.
I know that it would be such a great thing. And my husband's a morning person and I am the weak link in the family. I mean, my daughter can get up. So listen, this is how bad it is. Sophie makes my coffee every day.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
Goes to make my coffee. So all I have to do is like put a sweatshirt on and take her to school because I am the weak link. So I would love to have like that quiet time in the morning where I'm reading and doing all that stuff. But like realistically, I'm the last one to bed. Like I can't my rhythm is just so different than everybody in my family. And thankfully they work with me, they're just, they know, but like, I literally like can stay up all like till like 2 or 3 painting and be like in my prime. But having Sophie has definitely like, I have to mold myself more to her schedule, or whatever. But so we listen to, Christian music on the way to school. when I come back, I'll listen to like a podcast. It can even be about parenting. I still consider that like something that's helpful for my spirit. But that just going outside for me is huge. Walks at Radnor Lake is a huge thing for me. Like just that walking, it's a really pretty lake with a walking trail. I actually named my big dog after it, but it's like my best friend and I call it Radnor therapy. We go out there and we just walk and we, like that time is also, I feel like spiritual with my best friend. Like we go and she has 4 kids. Like I started late. I didn't have my Sophie till I was 36, like and turned 37 not long after I had her. And so my best friend has 4 that are all college or out. And so she's my go-to, like such a good spiritual mentor for me. I think that's another part of my thing is I'm constantly seeking out like advice from my spirits, people that have kind of been there, done that, and who are such godly women and men. And I'm like, okay, well, how did you approach this? Like, did anything like this ever happen to you? And so those conversations are very spiritually fulfilling to me. And just to know, which I think is something that the book makes clear too, that like, we're all in, like, nobody got this right. Nobody has done this correctly. Whatever. I mean, I look at my best friend and her 4 kids, and I think that they are the most amazing young adults ever. And I'm like, and then she'll tell me some stories of some things that happened. I'm like, okay, I feel so much better, So those are all things that spiritual, like the music, the Christian podcast or listening to a Bible in a year, going through the Lord's Prayer pretty much every day, time outside, just listing everything I'm grateful for. So those are just some of the practices that I do.
Yeah, you both mentioned things that are relatively easy to do. The waking up early, that can be hard. But, if you look at what it truly is, it's just wake up, get out of bed.
So simple.
Yeah, it can be staying up and being up in the middle of the night too. I think it's equally valuable for you to be a night owl as it is to be an early bird.
I'm still getting that alone time. I'm still getting that. Yeah,
absolutely,
100%. Yeah, 100%. Now let's talk about the faith journey as a whole. I think many of us run into seasons of doubt, or maybe, yesterday felt doubtful, today feels really encouraging. When you run into those doubtful moments where you're questioning, well, God, are you truly who you say you are? Or God, I'm having a really hard time trusting you right now. Sarah, you called it a crisis of faith in the book. Do your methods of making sure you are living by the Lord's hand, do those methods change, or do you amplify them in some way? What do you do? All right, friend, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This was just part 1, so stick around next week for part 2. Sarah and Emily will be back, and we are going to talk about how they navigate crises of faith. And then we'll talk about self-care, which Sarah approaches a little bit differently. She encourages us to remember the joys of our own childhood and identity, and to remember the ease of freedom and a carefree existence, which is going to fill our love tanks that we can then use to pour out onto others. But I asked her, well, how do you avoid falling into unhealthy escapism or even resentment if you're thinking back to, hey, remember when it was just me and all I had to do was take care of me? So she has some interesting things to say about that. So stick around, make sure you're following Mom's Grab Coffee wherever you're listening, and then don't forget about the giveaway. I have 2 copies of 40 Days to a Joyful Motherhood that I'm giving away. So go to joyful.momsgrabcoffee.com to enter, or click the link in the show notes. All right, Mama, thanks for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful, hope-filled week. And I'll catch you again next Monday for a cup of coffee with a side of faith, wisdom, and hope.